While Splatoon 2 is a fairly well-balanced game, sub weapons are a big exception. There's a huge divide between the best and worst subs, and they ruin a lot of weapon kits. So today, I want to talk about why that divide exists, solutions for Splatoon 3, and rebalancing a good amount of the sub weapons. And hey, if you enjoy the video, consider subscribing. And without further ado, let's break down the sub weapon balance. So currently, sub weapon balance looks something like this, and what you'll notice is that bombs are on the top of the tier list, while many of the non-lethal or utility sub weapons are at the bottom. This is the big sub weapon divide Splatoon 2 has, but why are bombs so much better than everything else? The big reason is that a lot of these sub-weapons lack utility. Let's look at Point Sensor for example. It marks opponents, but that's really all it does. Autobomb and Torpedo not only locate an opponent, but send something towards them that they have to deal with, either by shooting it down or moving slightly. Yes, Point Sensor provides a location marker that lasts slightly longer, but think of the amount of things the bombs do better. They force people to move or take an action, they paint the map a little bit, and they locate someone. The S-tier bombs not only paint really well, in fact better than Sprinkler, the painting sub itself, but they provide poking pressure both when you do and don't have map control, can force people to move, and can be useful for farming special weapons. Bombs just have way more usefulness than a lot of the non-lethal subs. So, now that the divide between all the different types of sub-weapons has been explained, I'm going to go over rebalancing all the different types of sub-weapons, which is mostly buffing the non-lethal subs to have more utility, and slightly toning down bombs to be more balanced. First up is Point Sensor. Now, while Point Sensor's location certainly has its uses, it's currently a bit too limited. The big way I think this could be solved is by giving it a distinction compared to all the other location subs. In this case, I think locating someone with a Point Sensor should show the specific main weapon, not just the player location. This would make them unique compared to all the other subs that can target opponents, and give it its own niche. Next up is Sprinkler. First up, this sub absolutely needs to paint better, so we're going to be increasing that slightly. But more importantly, we're going to give it an entirely new effect. Sprinkler will now have a message show when it's destroyed, which could help with some recon purposes, and you could throw Sprinkler into an area to test if players are nearby based on if they shoot it down. Additionally, this bit of information will make it so people are less likely to shoot down Sprinkler in some situations, meaning it's more likely to help paint and build your next special. For the last of the weaker sub-weapons, we have Toxic Mist. It's inevitable that this sub needs some kind of lingering effect similar to Splat 1 Disruptor. So, with this new Toxic Mist, if you get hit by it, the effect will last on you for about a second longer after you leave it. To make up for this, we're going to be reducing the duration of Toxic Mist on the field by just around half a second, just to make sure this isn't too broken. And the last sub to be receiving any form of buff will be Curling Bomb. Now, Curling Bomb is not really used as much of a bomb, but more as an escape or approach option. In order for it to have a decent hitbox to be considered a lethal sub-weapon, it needs to be charged up. I think the best way to fix this is by having the charge up animation be 20% faster. This means you can take much more advantage of closer range, bigger explosion curlings without having to sit there for super long charging it, which should make it a lot more unpredictable. So, what about Squid Beacon and Ink Mine? While both of these sub-weapons do require map control to be pretty useful, the sub-weapons themselves are still pretty strong. While they take some time to set up, it's absolutely worth it, as it gives a ton of jumps back in and provides a bit of recon with locations. Ink Mine is great for stalling objective, watching flanks, or putting a bit more paint pressure when people are contesting zone. There isn't a great way to reasonably buff these sub-weapons without making them insanely good when you have map control. Rather, I think the big problem is the kits they're attached to. Seriously, Nintendo, stop giving short-range weapons beacon. Please put them on weapons that have enough range to poke. Ink Mine, same thing, except there's not as many short-range Ink Mine weapons at least, so it's not as big a problem. But yeah, for these subs, I really think it's more Nintendo puts them on the wrong weapons. They're fine as long as the main weapon is able to poke for itself. And that brings us to the last of the non-lethal subs, Splash Wall. Splash Wall is actually in a pretty good spot, but it is a bit weird since its main counters are the bombs above it with the exception of Burst Bomb, and it's really good against most main weapons. So considering how we're going to be adjusting the balance of all the other subs, Splash Wall will take 5% more damage from main weapons and 5% less damage from bombs, just to make sure the bomb nerfs don't indirectly make it too good. And now we can get into the bombs, starting with Autobomb and Torpedo. These sub-weapons aren't too drastic, and I think they're perfectly well balanced and don't need any major changes. Both of them put a good amount of pressure, but don't force movements as there's many ways to deal with them. For Autobomb, its explosion radius isn't too large, and for Torpedo, it's very easy to shoot down for most weapons. I think both of these are completely fine. Finally, we reach the main set of bombs, which means it's finally time to talk about last-ditch effort. Last Ditch Effort is extremely broken as it adds way too much sub saver and ink recovery into the mix, which makes bomb poking unbelievably broken, and because the ability activates at a score of 50 or less, it becomes active at pretty much any relevant point in a match, especially on zones. Nerfing bomb spam means LDE has to be adjusted, and so, rather than giving 8 subs of each ability, it will give 6. This still makes it a really strong ability and something that will still probably be meta on a lot of weapons, but is much more toned down. This especially helps for toning down bomb spam, as they're the main subs to benefit from Last Ditch, especially considering how many of the non-lethal sub-weapons don't use that much of your ink tank. Out of all the remaining bombs, Burst Bombs is the least drastic, and with Last Ditch Effort nerfs, I feel it's in a completely fine spot, so there'll be no further changes to it. First on the chopping block is Splat Bomb. Splat Bomb currently is really good against slower weapons with its incredibly fast detonation time, and is great for putting out pressure. So we'll be increasing its detonation time by 10 frames or 1/6 of a second, which should especially help slower weapons get out of the way, and slightly reduce the amount of pressure it puts out. Next up is Suction Bomb. This could be even more difficult to balance since the explosion radius is such a large part of why it's so good, and you can't reduce that without making it too similar to Splat Bomb. So I'll be adding an entirely new mechanic to balance the sub. Suction Bomb will now have 150 HP and be able to take damage from enemy fire. The damage it takes will contain the same multipliers as Brella's shields. Basically, weapons that are slower will deal more damage, and faster fire rate weapons will deal less damage. Shooting at the bomb will cause it to shrink, which will lower its explosion size and painting. Shooting the bomb still draws a bit of attention and therefore gets value, however this means there's much more counterplay to the sub-weapon, and that its explosion radius and paint can be reduced drastically, which means there is much more options for dealing with suction spam, as it's currently one of the best subs at walling out an area consistently. Finally is Fizzy Bomb, the best of the sub-weapons. Fizzy will be getting 2 nerfs. The first one will be an ink efficiency nerf, increasing its usage on the ink tank from 60 to 65%. This, combined with the Last Ditch Effort nerf, should make it so double Fizzy Bombs require a good investment of gear and are no longer something you could get by just running Last Ditch Effort. And secondly, the time between each explosion will be increased by 1 frame. This is a small change, but makes it a bit easier to escape from the bomb's 3-hit kill. Double Fizzy is a big part of what makes this sub-weapon so good, since it's really easy to run Double Fizzy with just Last Ditch Effort, so making it so it requires a good amount of gear fixes the main problem with the sub. And there you go, the sub-weapons rebalanced and reworked to be much more even for Splatoon 3. However, while you could rebalance everything, there may be a much simpler solution Nintendo could try. If utility subs are better in specific situations, and bombs are better in general situations, why not just give players access to both in one kit? Separating subs into lethal and non-lethal subs with their own different types of sub savers could be a great way to spice up kits for Splatoon 3 and make sure more kits are viable. While there would definitely still need to be some sub-weapon tweaking, this would ensure that kits would overall be a higher quality since you don't have to worry about not giving something a bomb. Personally, it's something I'm hoping to see in Splatoon 3. It would definitely require some testing and a little bit of sub-weapon changes, but I find it the more unique concept that adds a lot to the game. However, that's just my ideas. Let me know your thoughts on how you would change sub-weapons, and thank you all so much for watching. So now that the that's gonna be fucking pain to say. So, now that the divide, oh my god. This is gonna take forever. So now that this is such a fucking terrible thing to have to say.